In Athens, around 380 BCE, the philosopher Plato set out to draft the ultimate blueprint for a perfectly just, logically governed city. He called this massive project the Republic. Buried inside his vision for this utopia is a radical, unsettling demand. Plato calls for the absolute exile of all poets, removing them from the city limits entirely. His primary target is Homer. As this bust shows, the ancient Greeks revered Homer as their unquestioned authority, treating his work as a practical encyclopedia for how to live a life. The scale of the Theater of Dionysus reflects the way this poetry was consumed. These were massive, emotionally explosive, and highly public civic events. When Plato looks at those massive crowds, he makes the founding gesture of literary theory. He treats art as a dangerous force that must be logically prosecuted to protect the stability of society. To make his case, Plato starts with his theory of forms. Think of a perfect triangle. He argued that physical objects are merely flawed echoes, just as drawn triangles are imperfect copies of an eternal, perfect blueprint. We can see how this applies to art by looking at a three-tiered hierarchy of reality. Level 1 is the divine unchanging form of a bed. Level 2 is the carpenter's physical bed, built looking toward the form but remaining a flawed copy. Level 3 is the artist's painting, copying the physical object from one angle, a copy of a copy. Plato uses the word mimesis, or imitation, to describe this. He argues that poets act like counterfeiters, writing sweeping epics about warfare or medicine without possessing any real expertise in those fields. This forms the first half of Plato's proof. Because art is twice removed from actual truth, it is structurally dishonest, offering audiences the mere illusion of knowledge. The danger goes beyond simple dishonesty. Plato argues that because art mimics the appearance of wisdom, it actively damages the human mind. Plato's tripartite soul requires the logical reason sector to strictly govern spirit and appetite. But poetry gains direct access to your emotional appetites. Weeping for a tragic hero bypasses your logic, actively strengthening the irrational part of your soul. This makes poetry a civic threat. It trains the mind to surrender to irrationality, feeding the exact emotional impulses that a stable society relies on its citizens to control. Plato wraps this entire argument into one of the most famous visual metaphors in history, the allegory of the cave. Prisoners are chained inside a cave from birth, forced to stare at a blank wall. Behind them, puppets pass a fire, casting distorted shadows. Because those flickering shadows are the only things the prisoners have ever experienced, they mistake these artificial illusions for absolute reality. To Plato, allowing poetry to flourish is equivalent to keeping citizens chained in that cave, forcing them to worship emotional shadows rather than ascending towards the sunlight of reason. Plato's final verdict combines both prongs. Poetry creates deceptive illusions that empower human irrationality. This force is incompatible with his mission. It is structurally impossible to build a rational city if the citizens' minds are endlessly compromised by emotional manipulation. We still use Plato's framework today. Whenever we debate the societal harm of violent video games, the nature of social media algorithms, or the power of political propaganda, we are echoing his ancient fears. To defend the art and media we consume, we must answer Plato's central accusation. We have to prove that art can be a source of real knowledge, rather than a hack on human reason. Plato realized that whoever controls a society's emotional narratives ultimately controls its reality. He banished the poets because he understood just how much power they truly held.